DrZero show right now will connect to Belgrade. From Belgrade, we have an entrepreneur consultant, Danica Radisic. Hi, Danica, how are you?
Hi, Serdar. I'm doing great. I'm actually well rested, had to have a good weekend behind me, and ready to talk and get back to work.
Wonderful. I know you are very active in the entrepreneurial area, and in one of our talks, you told me that there is a problem in the entrepreneurship itself and in entrepreneurship ecosystem. Could you please tell us what is the problem, or what are the
Well,
problems?
yeah, all right. That's a little bit. That's an area that we would need hours and days to cover. But yeah, I'll be happy to start the conversation with a few things that I've noticed. Um, the issue in today's day and age, in regards to entrepreneurship, is threefold. First and foremost, and probably the most important issue, is that markets are shifting, and most of those markets are unprepared and don't have functioning ecosystems that are ready to support viable entrepreneurship on a grander scale. On the other hand, most of our economies are very dependent on entrepreneurship, not only in terms of the private sector, but also in terms of solopreneurs. I'll give you an example. Serbia, where I am, I would say, from what I know, and these are somewhat older statistics, I'm going to say from 4 or 5 years ago, but about 70% of our economy is based on either micro or small companies. So, our economies are very dependent on it, but somehow the markets aren't quite par. The second issue is obviously education, and I don't even need to get into that. Education is just in today's day and age simply throughout, from grades K to 12 throughout college, simply, let's just say, somewhat failing in preparing young people to not just start, but to run and manage businesses of their own, even if they buy an existing business. So that's number two. And again, that's another area that, we could pick apart and talk for days on end. But I'm going to say the third issue, and of course, we're speaking. If we go into countries and certain markets and certain industries, we can talk in more detail. But on a grand and global scale, the third issue is that, frankly, is funding. And I don't mean that there isn't enough money going around. I'm talking about the way that money is going into
The
entrepreneurship and
way.
startups. And yes, the way the methodology is outdated, the way that investors and funds, and let me tell you, a lot of them are aware of this. This is a problem that I haven't identified myself, but I've heard from financiers and investors and people in investment, is that it is tougher than ever to identify companies to invest in, to discover them, to find them, and they are, readily trying to discover new ways of doing it. And obviously, something that you and I have touched upon before, the thing that's wrong with investment and in the startup industry is, unicorns.
Yes.
The way we evaluate companies, and the way we
Can you
decide
elaborate
to
on
whether or
it,
not to
like
invest.
about the corns? What is the problem about unicorns? The way that we evaluate, what is the problem there?
Well, you know what? Come on, let's take WeWork as an example, right?
Yes.
From the get-go, most people that I talk, 90% of people that I talk to that know anything about basic investing and math, we looked at it, and again, we've mentioned this before. It's a thing we talk about, right? As soon as the company showed up, we looked at it and we're like, wait a minute, okay, so they're going into long-term debt, not to mention the maintenance costs on the properties and everything. They're going into long-term debt, and
Mhm.
their revenue is going to come from
Short
short-term
term.
contracts.
Yeah.
And we're just like, wow. And suddenly they could know they're investors. I'm not going to name any names here. We know who they are. They're
Yes.
investors. Like,
Very big
this is something we
investors,
believe in.
but very
Right,
big
right, right. And
investors.
and it was a little, yeah. And it was surprising because they should know what they're doing better than I do. So I was like, all right. I looked at it, I was like, all right, there's got to be some trick behind this. I'm sure they have something down the road in the plans. I'm sure these investors have seen
But we
something that I haven't.
expect
And
we
it turns
expect
out they
something like
haven't.
this. But we expect something like this. Like they should be smarter than us. Most probably they know something
Exactly.
that we don't know, isn't it? And then in the end, you say,
Right. Well,
okay,
it
they
turns
knew
out they
nothing.
aren't. No, it turns out that was actually what they were investing in. So, first and foremost, and yes, WeWork is an extreme example, and hopefully it's a fluke, and hopefully that's not the direction. Hopefully it's a big, for some people it's a warning sign. For others, it's like, yeah, I told you guys that wasn't going to work. Um, but basically, and I'm not saying that anything needs to change tremendously. I'm actually saying that I think we need to go back to the roots of investing. And I think people in investment in general and in the startup ecosystem globally and in various countries need to learn to have a little patience.
Hmm.
Sometimes things done well are better than things done fast. On the other hand, it's about finding that perfect sweet spot of getting to market as soon as possible and getting revenue and maybe even turning a profit as soon as possible versus just versus just building up this big company and this big valuation. I'm just uncomfortable, and that just might be me and my conservative view and stance on financing and building businesses in general, is that I think we're going a little too fast, a little too big. Another good example is Upwork. I think it's a phenomenal company. I think they're building great things for the future. I don't like the word gig economy. It's a new buzzword. Gig economy is something that humans have been doing and surviving off of for hundreds of years, since the industrial age, since the very beginning, the roots of the industrial age. So but Upwork is doing great things. On the other hand, and as far as I can tell, I might be wrong. I did take a look at their finances and stuff. They've been turning a phenomenal revenue, but they have not been profitable since they've gone public. And I get it. I get it. When you go public, you're looking at your valuation and your stock value more than anything else. You're also looking to build for the future. You're thinking very long term, 20, 30, 50 years. So I get what they're doing. But on the other hand, I think we're focusing a little bit too much on that valuation and stock and making it bigger and going global and this and that. And I'd like to get us back to just starting really quality small startups. And you know what? I think that's where the innovation is. I think that's why the entire world is now suddenly, not suddenly, obviously, but lacking, or rather slowing down. We still have innovation, but it's slowing down in comparison to what we had 20 years ago, right? To the boom with the innovation boom with the likes of Google and search engines, and then 10, 15 years ago with social media, right?
Hmm.
I think that innovation is slowing down in terms of, and when I say innovation, I mean humans' use of uh, ICT and IT. I think that's slowing down because I think everybody in the finance and in the investment world, and hence because that's where the money is also in the startup world, is looking for the next big thing. I don't think we need to be looking at the next big thing. I think we need to be looking at viable, profitable, building viable, profitable startups and businesses that can, make incremental innovation, and I believe that's how we actually, in the end, make good things and big
Can we
things
say
happen.
that we are sort of in the valuation bubble and entrepreneurship bubble, like 2000s, where we have the bubble of internet, bubble of other industries? So this bubble should
Right.
burst so that we realize about what is important for entrepreneurship and what is important for valuation.
Right. And that's a great question, and one that I believe needs to be discussed more, and in particular, that word bubble. Right. So, is there a bubble in terms of a startup bubble? No. Is there a valuation bubble? No. Not when we look at the entire market.
Mm-hmm.
So a bubble means that it's overvalued, that there isn't a firm standing behind it, and that it could pop any minute, right? And it will pop. Every bubble eventually pops.
Mm-hmm.
But are there bubbles within this ecosystem? I would say yes. Is there a unicorn bubble? Yes. And the ridiculous part is that it was self-made because people kept looking for the next unicorn or wanting to be the next unicorn, and that's the ridiculousness of it. The reason we call them unicorns is because they're rare and we don't know exactly what they are or where they come from. So trying to create one deliberately is just a little weird. So yeah, I think there's a unicorn bubble. Is there a valuation bubble? In certain terms, yes, I think in today's day and age we are valuing some things that we shouldn't be. And again, we need to again, like with work, you need to take a closer look, and you just need to go back to some very basic math and to finance 101. Um, so that being said, yeah, there is, I wouldn't say there's a startup bubble. There is a higher end startup bubble, starting the next cool big thing. It doesn't need to be cool, right? It needs to be useful, because that's what a startup is. That's what a business is. That's what any product is you identify a need in the market and you see how you can best meet that need, and you try to do it better or a little bit differently. So yeah, in the notion itself, yeah, there's a bubble. I think we're overcomplicating it.
Thank you very much for joining from Belgrade. I hope we can meet and discuss more different issues.
Thank you, Seda. Let's stay in touch. I always love talking to you.
Bye.
Bye.